welcome to Conversations with Crystal. I am your hostess, Crystal, and thank you for joining us this evening. That piece of music you've just heard is some acoustic blues from our guest this evening, Scotty Burford. G'day, Scotty. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, Scotty. I'm really, really good.
Excellent.
Been a wet day today, hasn't it?
Oh, it's been very wet this afternoon.
Yeah, good for ducks.
Very much so.
I'm really excited to talk to you, Scotty, because I've seen you on Facebook for a few years now with your world record attempts at different things. So I'd like to talk about those a little bit later.
Yeah.
But also I know you as a pretty good guitarist, I must say, and also that you're in a duo with Bianca Terami.
Yes.
So we'd like to talk about that a little bit later on also,
Great.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, I'd like just tell me a little bit about yourself. What is it you like to do? Who are you? And what do you do for a day job?
Okay. Scotty Burford. And I've never actually had a day job, to be honest. I've worked in music for a very long time, doing all sorts of things. And so I guess the obvious thing is gigs. I've done a lot of gigs, and at the moment I'm quite busy with gigs again. So I'm doing anything up to 6 gigs a week. But
that's awesome.
Which is great. But in the past, I've done a lot of studio work, both playing on albums and doing things for film and television and advertising and whatever. But also at one stage, I used to do a lot of work with independent guitar makers and the like, and various companies actually promoting their gear,
oh wow,
which was fun. That became a bit of a niche thing for a while. And do that. I've also done things like I used to actually write music charts for singer-songwriters when they were touring. They were touring with an album. Like at one stage, a lot of club bands. I don't think this exists anywhere in Australia anymore that I can work out. But you'd have like a club would have a house band. And they might have an artist that's touring. They just come in and pass out the charts to the musicians in the club band and perform them at their gigs. So I used to write manuscript for for singers that were touring an album or whatever. Been a gear demonstrator.
That's wonderful. You've done a lot of things. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I guess with that, I decided very early on when I was seriously thinking about becoming a musician and trying to work out how I was going to make money from it, was that I couldn't just put all my eggs in one basket.
True.
I think that's where a lot of musicians get stuck. So they think that the chances of becoming a star are 10 million to 1 or whatever. Just make up whatever figure that you want with that. In reality, that's highly unlikely. And even if you do get signed, you're still very unlikely to make money from it and have a sustainable career, but you end up becoming a slave to a record company. A little bit off tangent, but like when I was in my early 20s, I was in a couple of bands that Sony were interested in signing.
Oh.
And nothing ever came of it for a couple of different reasons. Both bands ended up breaking up, which I had nothing to do with that. With that, but I'm actually really glad that nothing ever came of that, because if I had have signed my life away to Sony, I probably would have just ended up in debt paying the record company back for the advance they give out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think very early on I started thinking that I really should develop a range of skills that would allow me to generate income streams, I guess.
That's the smart way of thinking about it, I think, because many musicians, that's what they want to do, is what you're doing is make it their full-time thing.
Yeah.
And they don't have either the contacts or the get up and go to do it. They think it's going to come knocking at their door, an actual fact, it's a lot of hard work.
Oh, that's very true. And once again, going back to when I was in my early 20s, I won't say who they were, but they were a very big band in Australia at the time. I used to know those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they too were supporting some big international acts and things like that. And I used to teach guitar at a music shop, and they used to rehearse there because one of them was friends with the guy who owned the music shop. They used to rehearse in one of the studios there. And I remember talking to the guitarist once, and they were like, "Oh no, this is what we do. We're in this band." And I said to him once, "Well, this style of music, which was grunge, I said,
Yep.
when that passes, what are you going to do?" "Oh no, it's never going away." And I thought, no, you can't.
Famous last words.
Yeah, even then, like I knew that as much as I love certain styles of music and certain musicians and everything, very few musicians can do the same thing forever. And live on something like, maybe Paul McCartney can, but he was in the Beatles, or but I mean, he's obviously done stuff since then. But it's very hard to actually have a sustained career just in one genre or whatever.
Absolutely, you've got to kind of move with the times. That's for
very
sure.
Much so. So I think with that, like professionally, I've played rock, pop, jazz, folk, classical, country, funk music. I've played in pit orchestras in shows. I've played on awful television ads and whatever else.
Oh.
And I've done all of that, and some of it I've actually thought was quite awful, what I have played, but I've made money from it, and I've learnt some things. Like there was a band I did some shows with probably 15 years ago or so, and I didn't really like their material. They had some really good paying corporate gigs, so I just jumped in and went, yeah, that's cool, I'll do that. And look, I'm not a big Kylie Minogue fan necessarily. And they had two girls that were singing in this show, and they'd picked some Kylie Minogue songs, and I actually had to learn them. And I went, there's a couple of really cool little keyboard lines. I'm going to learn those and work them out on the guitar and see what I can take from that. And I think that's another thing with, longevity as a musician, is being willing to listen to things and being open to other ideas instead of just rejecting it straight up.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I've actually been able to work so much, because I've had, different opportunities, I guess, come to me that that have given me, that I may not be particularly, well versed in some of these musical styles or whatever, but I've said, I'll have a go at that. No worries, I can do that. Like, I've done some pretty big country gigs, and when I first got approached from someone, it was not a genre I'd really played very much or listened to very much. And someone said, we've got this thing coming up at a festival. I've heard you can write charts. Can you write charts for my band? I went, I can do that. So I wrote the charts out for the band. He said, and can you be the music director and be the guitarist? And
fantastic.
No worries, I can do that. And then I spent 3 weeks just woodshedding on country music, so I was ready to play. And I got through it. There were obviously much better country musicians than I. And I remember, like, at one stage being up at the Gympie Muster, and I was playing with a few different people up there. Mm-hmm. And then there was a very dedicated bluegrass band, and they were amazing musicians. They invited me out on stage with them, and I was so out of my depth it wasn't funny, because that's not the sort of music I found I could just wing.
Right.
And
it's not like blues.
No, blues. I mean, blues is it's got its own stylistic, elements and everything else.
Yeah.
But I guess with bluegrass, it was a style of music I've not listened to very much, and I very quickly knew I was well out of my depth. And one of the guitar players was on stage was quite phenomenal as a bluegrass player.
Mm-hmm.
And that was okay. It was a learning experience. So I've always tried to say yes to everything. There's only ever been a couple of things that I've said no to.
Mm-hmm.
I got asked to fill in for a death metal band one night.
Death metal.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And like the guitars were tuned down to A, and it's not a style I listen to. And I thanked the guy that rang me and said, we really need a guitarist tonight. Can you come and play with us? And I said, look, I'm not the guy for this. Apart from anything, I would have had to have quickly set up a guitar just for that style for the night, because my guitars couldn't handle being tuned that low.
No.
And then I'd have to get it reset for regular playing and whatever. So, I passed on that. And there's been a couple of other things where I said, I'm not really the right person for this job. But for the most part, I've just been willing to have a go at anything and just work really hard to try and, be convincing, I guess. There are some things that I'm obviously much better at than others. But
I think as a musician, if you don't push yourself to do something different or to excel yourself or learn something new, then you're really not helping yourself.
Oh, that's really true as well. And I encourage every musician to go and listen to as many different other musicians as possible. I've often talked with people that I've given lessons to, and I've said, who's your favourite guitarist? And then we've talked about that, and I said, well, and who was their favourite guitarist? So when I was a kid, I was about 12 or 13 when I first heard Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I'd never heard anything like that before. I started playing guitar when I was quite young.
Mm-hmm.
But, Stevie Ray Vaughan was very different. When I was 12 or 13, starting to sort of, find my own musical interests and everything, it was the 80s. And so I liked bands like Midnight Oil or Hoodoo Gurus or whatever was popular. And I still actually like, especially Midnight Oil, but still really like that stuff too. But Stevie Ray Vaughan was like, what's this? I've never heard anything like this. And so as a 12-year-old or whatever I was, it completely blew my brain.
He was once in a century. And then, of course, you've got Jeff Beck.
Oh, yeah. Very amazing. He was an amazing guitarist too.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I
think with listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but my school used to get Guitar Player magazine in the school library. And so I remember one day we went into, we had a library class and we went in and there was this magazine with Stevie Ray Vaughan on it. And so I read it, and then he was talking about other players like Clapton and Hendrix. And so I went off and I've got two sisters. The older of the two had this Cream record. And I'd never heard anything like that either. So, I put it on at home and had a listen. And then I really liked what the guitarist was doing. I didn't even know it was Eric Clapton, actually. At the time, and then I found it was Clapton, and Stevie Ray Vaughan had talked about him, and so, bit by bit, I started going, oh, well, he likes this guy, and then I read some interviews with Eric Clapton, and he talked about, the great blues musicians that had been really influential to him, and so as I started going back and looking at them. It was hard to do in the 80s, much easier to do now because you can jump online and find out anything in an afternoon about someone. And go and easily listen to all sorts of things. Yes. But I for whatever reason the school library had that, and then I think it was I grew up in Sydney's North. I used to sometimes jump on the train and go to Hornsby Library, and they actually had records with some of these things, so I'd go in and listen to the records.
Oh, how lucky is that?
Yeah, and I'd find all these players, and so. For whatever reason, I was very much exposed to a whole range of different people.
So they were your influences, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton and, all of those players. And, of course, they lead back to the blues.
Yep.
So would you say they were your earliest musical influence or inspirations, or was there somebody before that?
No, it was actually
kind of led you to music.
The earliest memory I think I have of music, I think I would have been 3 or 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being in my bedroom, and my mum was in my room with me playing with some toys. And she had a Cat Stevens record on. There was a Cat Stevens song playing. I didn't know it was Cat Stevens at the time. but there was this thing that I could hear, and I asked my mother what that sound was, and she said, "That's a guitar."
Oh,
And it was like, I love that sound.
yep.
And so it was this, acoustic guitar on a Cat Stevens record. I'm going, oh, that's fantastic. So then, I used to, very early on, I started strumming the air. And then, I don't know if you remember that Beatles cartoon that used to
I
be on.
do. I do. I was actually talking with someone about that yesterday. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes, I do.
my mum was a massive Beatles fan.
As am I.
Well, I love the Beatles too, actually. And my mum had actually been one of the screaming teenagers in Sydney at their concert.
Oh, wow.
And so, jump forward, several years later, I'm born and, whatever. And she was playing Beatles stuff around the house at times. And then I remember there was that Beatles cartoon that used to be on. And I
Yep.
used to really like it. And I really liked Paul as a little kid.
Yes.
And he's still my favourite Beatle now.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I thought Paul played guitar. Once I worked out what a guitar was, I thought, well, Paul's playing guitar too. And I was convinced. I didn't know what a bass was when I was like 5 or 6. I just thought it was a guitar, and all guitars were, like this thing I'd heard on the Cat Stevens record, which was an acoustic. I didn't know the difference. So I started really thinking, oh, I really like that sound. And there's Paul, and Paul plays guitar, which obviously he does, but he's generally known as a bass player. But I think probably, the first memory I have of music is really Cat Stevens, and then the Beatles.
Finding the Beatles, yeah.
Very early age. At the same time, on my mother's side of the family, there's 11 cousins, and 7 of us are professional musicians.
Oh, good on you. That's
and so
awesome.
there was always music growing up. So my grandfather, my mother's father, was an amazing pianist, and played all sorts of things. And so I was exposed to a lot of music from him. And then even like another really strong memory as a little boy was my late Uncle Brian. I remember being at his place once in the backyard. I was with my aunt and uncle for the day, and we were in the backyard, and he had an album playing, which was actually, I found out later on, it was Willie Nelson, and Willie Nelson had done a version of Georgia on My Mind.
Oh, yes.
And
yes,
I remember as a little boy, my uncle singing Georgia on My Mind. And I absolutely loved it. I became obsessed with that song from 7 or 8 or something like that. I can't remember. I just remember hearing that and going, oh, I really like that.
Yeah.
And so, there were elements of, obviously rock and pop music, but then I got bits of blues and jazz coming through. One of my other uncles was a mad Miles Davis fan.
Oh, wow.
So I was hearing some of that also. And as I, started to become more and more obsessed with music, I guess, I started trying to listen to a lot of different things. And my father's not really, father's not a big influence with music with me, but he really liked Sky. I don't know if you remember them. Once again, it's a band when I was a little kid, which was
Sky
Hooks,
I know, but
not Sky Hooks.
No, just
Sky
I
was
don't know them.
John Williams, the classical guitarist.
Oh.
Who is an incredible musician. They were basically classical musicians who took things like Bach's Toccata and then played it with like a rock feel.
Oh, wow.
And John Williams as a classical guitarist is almost unmatched with his technique. He's actually an Australian gentleman. I think he's retired now. He'd be in his 80s, I think. Anyway, my father had a Sky record that I really liked too, because I really liked the sound of the guitar, and then some of the melodies and the drummer. I can't remember his name from the band. But I just really liked the beat under that. So I was exposed to a lot of different things, and I think now I really like a lot of different things too. A lot of people are quite surprised when they realise how eclectic my musical interests are. And even going back to the Stevie Ray Vaughan thing, I heard about Clapton from Stevie Ray Vaughan, but then a little bit later, I read another interview where Stevie Ray Vaughan was talking about a guitarist named Kenny Burrell that he really liked. And Kenny Burrell's a wonderful jazz player, and I think first appeared in the 50s. And so, I ended up somehow finding a Kenny Burrell record when I was a teenager, and I played the thing to death. And I absolutely love Kenny Burrell's playing. He's one of my favourite players, which is quite different to what you normally hear Stevie Ray Vaughan play. So it was really a whole mixture of things. And I used to there's music all the time on television.
Well, there was in the 80s, Donny Sutherland. There was, of course, Molly Meldrum. Bandstand, of course, the American Bandstand. I think, was there an Australian Bandstand as well? I'm not too sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I can't ever remember watching Bandstand live. So I'm not sure with that. I've only ever seen...
Actually, I think we did, because I have a friend in Melbourne and she used to go to St Kilda and watch, I think it was Bandstand back then.
Okay.
So that would have been during the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I remember Donny Sutherland, when he had that show, was it Saturday mornings, I think it was on?
Yeah, Sounds Unlimited.
Yeah, and, that's where, I think from that's where I probably, or maybe Hey Hey It's Saturday, but I think it was Donny Sutherland. Another massive musical influence on me has been Tommy Emmanuel. And
oh, yes.
As a kid, I remember seeing Tommy on TV. And me thinking, I want to be able to do that. Oh, I really love that. I want to do that.
He's a master.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But Donny Sutherland had, not just him, actually. There were a lot of shows that had all sorts of incredible musicians on that were not rock and pop stars. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of John McLaughlin, but that's where I first discovered.
Not offhand, no.
John McLaughlin came to prominence, first of all, with the Miles Davis Group.
Okay.
In the late 60s, and he was on a couple of really groundbreaking jazz rock albums in the late 60s. Then he started a very famous jazz fusion group called Mahavishnu Orchestra, where they fused jazz, rock, and Indian music together.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
It's pretty really interesting. It's a bit out there, and some of it sounds very dated because it's very 70s as well. But anyway, McLaughlin is an incredible guitarist. And, one day, he was on Donny Sutherland, of all things. And so, like, I was probably 12 or 13, and suddenly there's John McLaughlin on TV, at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. And then Tommy was on Hey Hey so often with Phil as well, his brother. And there'd be these other incredible musicians coming in and, just popping up on TV. And, even, as a kid, I used to listen to Triple M a fair bit. Doug Mulray would actually play some really unusual choices because he was quite interested in blues and jazz, blues and jazz rock sort of stuff. So I don't know if you're familiar with Robin Ford. He's another player I really love.
Yes, yes.
I first heard Robin Ford actually played on Triple M, of all things, which probably wouldn't happen now.
Probably not.
No, but Doug Mulray, I remember, waking up one morning and before I went to school, and Doug Mulray was playing, he used to play Stevie Ray Vaughan and Robin Ford and whatever else. It was interesting because there was just so much music that you could listen to. And
that's right. And how lucky were we?
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yeah. So they were your earliest influences, but when did you actually have a first guitar lesson or get your first guitar?
Oh, well, I got my first guitar when I was 6. And I had one lesson and didn't really like it.
Was it a strumming lesson?
I can't even really remember, to be honest. Do you know those Mel Bay books? Have you ever come across those?
Yes.
I remember getting a Mel Bay book, and Anyway, I sort of had one lesson, and it was probably just, this is how you hold the guitar, and wasn't particularly interesting. We moved. I lived in Canberra for a little while as a kid because of my father's work, so we kind of moved between North Sydney and there, and whatever else. So things got broken up a little bit too. And the guitar was something that I was really interested in, but I had a lot, as a kid, I liked a lot of different things. And so when I was about 12, I started getting a bit more serious about it once again and more interested in it. And I started playing it regularly. I wasn't particularly good. And I had a few more lessons. And by then, 2 other kids were starting to play. And, we started our first garage band, which I used to think sounded amazing. For years, I actually had a tape of when a bunch of us were about 12 or 13.
I was just going to say, please tell me you've got some sound from that.
I don't, unfortunately. The tape was I had the tape for years and it was destroyed in a move. And that might not be a bad thing.
Look, no, I think it would be a good thing to have it because you can look back and say, look at the passion we had. We may not have been the best musicians, but we had passion.
Well, we did. And we used to really upset the neighbourhood. Saturday afternoon there was one kid, his nickname was Nugget. And he was the kid that got put on bass because he was the worst guitarist out of a lot of us.
Oh, geez.
So we used to play in Nugget's garage, and it was pretty funny because we were truly terrible.
But did you guys have a name? Did you call yourselves anything?
I can't remember we had a name then. I really can't remember that group of us having a name. Those kids in the neighbourhood, and probably, I think more and more I was getting interested in the guitar, but it was competing with kicking the footy and the cricket bat and the surfboard and
of course,
all that sort of stuff too. Actually, when I was 15, I broke my ankle playing footy.
Oy.
And that was not a bad thing in retrospect. At the time, it was quite devastating. It was a really bad break. I was on crutches for months.
Oh.
And I couldn't do anything, so I played guitar all the time.
There you go.
And that's where I really, I think, it would have been 15. And so even though I was, playing a bit, it was just fun. I think when I broke my ankle, and I think it was like 4 months or something before I could really do anything because it was such a bad break.
Wow. Yeah.
It was hard for me to get around with crutches on the weekend. So I just play guitar for 8 to 10 hours, on a Saturday and a Sunday. Or instead
see, the universe had its own idea what it wanted you to do.
Well, possibly, yeah.
It wasn't football.
No. So, or even, I'd get home from school and get home from school when I was on crutches, and I couldn't go out and hang out with the other kids in the neighbourhood and, go out and play cricket or whatever we'd do. So because I had to, I couldn't really move that well, so I'd just go home, and I started playing the guitar, for 3 or 4 hours at night every night. And I'd play on the weekends. I'd just play the whole weekend over that time. And then, if I woke up early, sometimes I'd play guitar for a couple of hours before I went to school. So that's where things really started to click, I guess, because I was playing so much.
Now, what kind of things were you playing? Were you doing scales? Were you playing chords? Were you doing licks that you'd heard on an album? Or
I think then, to be honest, when I was 15 or so, I loved the Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff, but I wasn't really feeling confident with the idea of improvising.
Right.
At that point in time. I started trying to experiment a little bit with it, but wasn't really sure of what to do. And I spoke to a couple of older kids, and didn't really get much advice from them on things. It was just, I just learned this scale, which is a pentatonic scale, and you just play it up and down and you'll be fine. And I used to go, it doesn't really sound like anything, which didn't. And, in retrospect, their playing didn't really sound like much either. They were just better at playing the scale up and down. Probably when I was sort of 14 or 15, even though I was interested in electric guitar a little bit, I think it was really Tommy Emmanuel that really captured my imagination.
Yes.
And so I started really getting into finger picking. I'd had a few classical lessons. And so I had a bit of an idea of what to do with my fingers, though there is a fair bit of difference between classical and fingerstyle guitar as well. But I started listening to Tommy Emmanuel, and because he was on TV so much, I'd video something and then I'd get it and I'd try to work out what he was doing.
Oh my goodness, I've seen the way that man plays. And it's surprising to me that the guitar didn't actually self-combust.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
He plays it hard.
Oh yeah, he does. So probably 15-year-old me really wanted to be Tommy Emmanuel.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's good.
And that's sorry, yeah.
No, you're right.
So that's what I was really interested in Tommy, and then once again the idea of finding influences. Tommy led me to Chet Atkins.
I love Chet Atkins.
Oh, so do I.
Yep.
And then I just started listening for songs that had guitar in them, and obviously in the 80s there was lots of songs with guitar in it.
Yes.
And it was all sorts of things. And then once again, going back to my school library, for whatever reason, they had this book and a record called How to Play Blues Guitar.
Oh, what a score.
Yeah, and it was by a guy called Stephen Grossman. And Stephen is an American guitarist. He's an acoustic player, and he's a very decent player. I don't want to put him down as a player. He's a very decent player, but he's really a scholar more than a great guitarist, if that makes sense. In that,
it does. Yes. He grew very up technical.
Yeah, he grew up in New York, and he met a very famous ragtime and blues guitarist called the Reverend Gary Davis, who in the history of the blues is pretty significant as an acoustic player. And so Stephen, as a kid, met this guy and then started meeting all these other early blues musicians who had really, I guess, been involved with the first recordings and all that sort of thing. And so Stephen actually produced, and he's still going now, but he had produced this series of books on how to play like acoustic blues guitar and and all these different famous blues and ragtime players and everything else. And so my school library, for whatever reason, had this book, and he had a record that came with it where he would actually demonstrate on the record how to play the songs he transcribed in the book. So I started working. I remember I used to borrow that all the time. Started working on that.
That's a great influence. That's for sure.
Well, I love all that stuff. And then, probably, I started to get interested in improvised music as well, as a kid, as like a 15-year-old or whatever. And I'd heard a fair bit from, my uncles with the jazz interests and whatever. But I started trying to work out, well, what's Stevie Ray Vaughan doing here? How do I play a guitar solo like this? And then from there, I started listening to more and more jazz as well and started getting quite interested in that.
Jazz is the best. I love jazz and blues.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Everything stems from that. All music stems from it.
Yeah. A lot of it does, for sure.
So
sorry.
if you had any advice for a budding young guitarist or somebody who's older wanting to learn guitar, what would it be?
I think make sure you have fun. Make your practice sessions fun. Be consistent with your practice. realize that it will take some time, and whatever time and effort you put into something is what you get back. So,
Absolutely.
Don't expect that you'll be able to do something, immediately. And some things do take a long time. Like, there's a number, going back to Tommy Emmanuel, the first song I worked out to play with him, I remember working on it for months and months and months and driving my sister insane because she could hear me in my bedroom. Trying to work out how to play a bass line against a melody and the chords and whatever all at the same time.
Yep.
And it drove her nuts. And then I sort of got that, and then I got another piece and started working on that. And so now I know sometimes people come up to me and at gigs, other guitarists and things like that. And I know one comment that's often been made when people watch me play is, "Oh, your fingers hardly seem to move, and you make it look really easy. That must be easy what you're doing." And I said, "Well, look, some of it is, but some of it's actually quite complex. It's just that I've done it so much that it's second nature." So, like some of the Tommy stuff, and like I've done played a lot of improvised music now. So, some of that stuff is almost second nature, and obviously I'm always improving. But there's been a cost with that which people don't always see, which is the amount of time I've put into it. And probably another thing is, make sure you're relaxed when you play. A lot of people try to fight the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
They think they have to press really hard to get the strings, or they grip the pick very tightly. Being relaxed is really important.
Yes, that's good advice.
Yeah.
That's really good advice, actually. So, when did you get your first start with playing as a musician proper?
When I was 17, if we're talking the first paid gig.
Yes, first paid gig, yes.
First paid gig would have been 17.
Cool.
Yeah, at a cafe. I was atrociously bad. I was very shy as a kid as well.
Right.
For a whole bunch of reasons, which we don't need to go into now, but I was very shy when I was a kid.
So when you were bad, what makes you think that you were bad? Why?
Look, I guess...
Apart from, shyness, I get that.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure to other people there, they were like, man, look at this kid getting up here and having a go.
There was probably... Look, I guess with that, I'm just trying to think of how I want to put this. I come from a family... to be honest, I don't have a great relationship with my father.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very negative man and rubbishes everything that he can. And so I never had I was never encouraged to be anything. And it was always, you'll be no good at this. And so I took a lot of that on board.
Right. So kind of stopping you in your tracks before you get going. But you know what?
Yeah.
You had some internal compass that said, no, this is me and I'm going to do it.
Well,
I think
that's true, actually. For whatever reason, I decided this is what I really wanted to do. And look, this all came to a head a few years after that, where I was actually at uni studying arts law because that's what my father wanted me to do, be a lawyer.
Okay.
And it wasn't my thing at all. And, music was more and more important to me. And by the time I was at uni, even though I was studying that, the guitar was in my hands all the time. And I was playing in bands and even doing a little bit of teaching and things like that. And I never felt that I was good enough to do more than that.
I get it. You're right.
And
right.
A lot of it had to do with the way I'd been raised, with being told. My mother's not the most encouraging person either, to be honest. It's always, well, you're not going to be good at that. So, or that's nice. You've had a bit of a play, put it away, because you're never going to be any good at it.
They just didn't get it.
No,
they
didn't
get having passion.
When I was at uni, the guitar was a massive part of my life, or music was. Mm-hmm. And there were people I knew that were studying music and everything, and they were going, why don't you just go and study music? That's obviously what you want to do. And anyway, I was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I met someone, started getting lessons with them. And they were teaching at uni, and they said, why don't you go and do a music degree? That's obviously what you want to do. And I said, no, that's not for me. I'm not good enough. And eventually I thought, actually, this is really what I want to do. I want to be as good as I possibly can be on this thing, no matter what that, I don't know where that's going to lead me. I wasn't really thinking that far at the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, I talked to this guy I was getting lessons from, and he said, well, look, there's a scholarship program. You could think about applying for that. I can recommend you for that. I really think it'd be great for you to go and do this. Anyway, so I thought a lot about it and decided that I'd just finish that end of uni that year, and I'd go and study music. And that didn't go down well with my father. I told him first.
Probably not.
No, he slammed the phone down on me and didn't talk to me for a long time after that.
But did you finish that year out and then go and study music?
Yeah, I did.
Good on you.
And
good on you.
There was a lot of opposition from people. I think that when you say you're going to go into a creative field and you're possibly thinking about making it a career, and as I said, at that stage I was so uncertain with a lot of things, as a 20 or 21-year-old, really, with what do I do with music? And I was quite shy because of my upbringing and everything. So I think more and more people started going, actually, you're pretty good at this. But I still had so much, I guess, baggage that I was carrying.
Doubt in yourself, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, at one stage I just went, nah, stuff it, I'm going to do this. And so
Good
I
on
did.
You. I'm glad you did.
Well, thank you. And sometimes it's funny when, talk to people that knew me as a kid. And some people were quite, some people were quite encouraging when I was little and going, oh, you think, this is great, you're into it. But I think it's funny, with some of the things I've achieved since, and I've made a living out of it, which is a great thing anyway. But
absolutely it is.
Yeah, suddenly I went from being that shy, awkward kid, and I can still be shy and awkward at times, I know that. But, I guess some of the things I've done, like there was, I was a runner-up in the Australian Guitarist of the Year competition at one stage, or there was there used to be the Frankston International Guitar Festival in Melbourne, or just outside. Melbourne,
yes.
And they used to have the National Finger-Picking Championships, and I was a runner-up in that once.
Wow.
And, and I remember, one day I got a phone call, and the voice on the end of the phone said, oh, hello, is this Scott? And I went, yeah, it is. And he said, oh, this is Phil Emanuel. And I was like, no, it's not. I wanted to say, piss off, who's this? But I didn't. But it was Phil. And he was like, wow. Look, mate, I've got a copy of your album. I'd recorded an EP.
Oh, that's so cool. How old were you when you did that?
Oh, I was in my 20s, maybe 27.
Mm-hmm.
I recorded this EP with 5 songs, and an agent that I really should mention her, actually, Narelle Brown, who ran the JB's Entertainment Agency, and she was based on the south coast of New South Wales, but she had, when I first met her, she was booking gigs all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And, Narelle sadly passed away earlier this year, and I was actually, at her request, I was actually the MC at the funeral. She was an amazing friend and mentor to me, and she got me a lot of work and really supported me a lot with with who I was and what I wanted to do musically. But yeah, she'd organised some gigs for Phil with a tour through New South Wales, and when she was at one of his shows, she said, "Listen to this CD, I think you'll like it." So she gave him my CD, so he rang me. Because he wanted to tell me that he liked it and could we play together.
No way.
Yeah. Which was quite.
Oh, that's so cool.
Which was great, And look, unfortunately, that time it didn't work out. because I was booked with shows that were going interstate and I couldn't line up with him. But Phil was really a good friend for a while, and always encouraging me to keep playing. So, things like that, I think, and there's other stuff as well, but I think I sometimes look back and go, I've done all these things that people said I could never do.
That's right. And on some level, it's got to be quite satisfying for yourself that, hey, I've done this.
It is. And I think the more, I guess the older I go and the further I get away from some of those things, the more it means to me as well.
Yeah,
that makes
definitely.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my watch is talking now.
So your first act was on your own? Was
it
doing a solo thing? Was it in the...
I was really interested in fingerstyle guitar, as I mentioned before then, and
right.
I wanted to. I would really like sort of that early blues, acoustic blues stuff, or once again, he's another guy that really, not my generation, but and I don't know how I discovered him, but I loved Bob Dylan's folk stuff.
Oh, I love Bob Dylan. I love Bob Dylan.
I think he's wonderful. I have no idea how I got into Bob Dylan, but I did.
You know what I could never work out about Bob Dylan is how he could remember 500 verses of a song. Or did he make them up as he went? I wonder. I don't know. I would love to talk to him and find out.
I don't know with that. He was convinced he was going to die as a young man. And so the idea behind Hard Rain, from what I understand, is that he wrote the first line of every song he thought he'd never get to write. And that's what it's about. Yeah, it's amazing.
Interesting, a really interesting process too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So apparently that, he typed it up, and then he, I've heard other, folk musicians that were around him in the early 60s in New York saying, he'd be in his apartment and then he'd come down with these lyrics and they'd be all typed up, and then he'd perform it and try the song, and then, he'd go away and perhaps edit it a little bit or
add another verse.
Drop it. Add a verse, or, I mean, some of the songs have got several verses.
Definitely several.
Yeah, I think the pinnacle of that, do you know Sad-Eyed Lady at the Lowlands?
Yes, I have heard it, yes.
Yeah, that's the whole of one side of an LP, which is 17 minutes or something like that.
That's hilarious, isn't it, really?
Oh, it is. And some of those songs I quite like Desolation Row. I think it's about 12 minutes.
Yeah, that's incredible that you can keep a song going for that amount of time.
Yeah, very much so.
So can you tell me a funny story from any gig at any time so far in your life, where it's just struck you at that moment, oh my God, this is a keeper. I'll remember this moment.
Oh, there's so many, actually. There's been disasters that I've been involved with, or this. I guess one thing, for musicians, and some of this can be quite funny and also quite infuriating. But you have to learn to deal with all manner of people.
Oh, yes.
And so there are people that are very, very opinionated on music, and especially if they had a few drinks, they might not, they might really not know what they're talking about, but they've got to tell you, I find that especially in Australia. When I've worked in the US or in Asia, it's been very, very different. I've never played having said that, when I've played in America, it's been like LA and across the top part of the country. I've not played in any of the redneck bars down south, so maybe they're a little bit closer to some of our pubs in Australia. I'm not sure.
I think we're probably rowdier.
But, sometimes, I've pulled up at places and I've had people that have been quite drunk wanting to yell at me even when we're in the car park. And so I've had, people like the punters. I remember one night this guy came up to me and was just staring at me. And he said, jazz is a mixture of jazz and music, and just walked off. And I was like, I was laughing. I was kind of, what's he trying to, he's trying to be profound.
Yes. I'm sure it sounded
but
profound to him.
It did, or, I've heard a few things. Another guy one night came up to me and, was trying to sound educated. Yep. With the way he was talking, but then he started talking to me about John Lennon.
Okay.
And he started saying that John Lennon was in the Rolling Stones, and I said I was trying to be polite, but going no, John Lennon wasn't in the Rolling Stones, and he just couldn't accept that it wasn't. So I found like you get those sorts of people at gigs that are really adamant that they know something.
Oh yeah.
And some of them are quite passionate about what they're saying. Like I find song requests, where you get a request from someone and it makes no sense whatsoever, but in their mind they're convinced they're right.
Yes.
So I used to have a jazz band, and there's two stories I'll go with on this. But we were playing at a function one night, and a guy came up and he wanted to hear the song Tickets to Hungary.
Okay.
And he was just telling me over and over, play Tickets to Hungary, plays Tickets to Hungary. And it was really hard because I was actually trying to play. We were meant to be playing over dinner, and this guy's trying to talk to me while we're trying to play.
And that's so hard. You can't.
Oh, I find it really hard to do that. Some things it's all right, I can do it, but other things I can't. Anyway, this guy was going at me about Tickets to Hungary. And that went on for a little while, and then someone sort of managed to shuffle him along from on stage. So then he came up to me in one of the breaks while speeches were being made and said, I want this Tickets to Hungary song. And I said, I've got no idea what the song is. I've never heard of Tickets to Hungary.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said, you know how it goes. And he started humming the tune. And the song was actually The Lady is a Tramp. And the first line of it is, she's always hungry because dinner's at 8 or something like that. So anyway, I had no idea what Tickets to Hungary was, but that's what he was after.
Oh dear. See, I probably would have thought he wanted Ticket to Ride.
Oh, that's possible too. I've had some of those things. Or with that same band, we were booked once to play at a club. Bowling club wanted to have Sunday jazz over lunch, and I've played some pretty modern / weird jazz, where it's very it's a bit out there for the average person. I get that. And a band. Well, actually, these guys that I used to play with them, we used to often play that sort of stuff that you'd hear in a jazz club, and that was great. But we knew for Sunday at a bowling club, we're not going to be playing something that's bordering on experimental. And so we used to book a singer that was very much in the style of Tony Bennett, and we picked all sort of jazz tunes that people would know or should know. So we were doing songs like "Fly Me to the Moon" and things like that.
Of course, yeah.
All the standards that are quite well known. So and it was the sort of gig where really Tony Bennett or Frank Sinatra could have just sat in if they wanted to, because we were doing all this sort of stuff. We played 2 sets, and the general manager came to me and said, "You haven't played any jazz yet." and I was like trying to be polite because he was the manager and he was going to be paying us afterwards and everything. And I said, "Oh, perhaps you could just help me with what you're thinking." And he said, "Well, how about you play Mustang Sally?" And I went, "Oh, well, that's kind of African American music, at least originally. So, okay, we could do that." And he said, "And play April Sun in Cuba."
Oh dear.
And
were you shaking your head at this point?
I was still trying to keep a straight face.
I would have been no good at that.
But I'm not always the best. But I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Yeah.
Oh dear.
So anyway, I can say that in the final set, it's the first time I've ever heard an extended trombone solo through Apple Sunny Tuba. And probably the only time I ever want to hear that. We were killing ourselves laughing as we were playing
but
it.
you know what? He probably thought, that's what I wanted to hear.
Well, it was. And then Narelle, the agent I mentioned just before, who passed away, anyway, I was talking to her a few days later because she rang me and said, I've just got the job report back. And I said, oh, what's it say? And he said they didn't play any jazz until I suggested they play Apple Sunny Tuba. And, that was,
dear.
so that we didn't play any jazz till the third set when we did that.
Oh, my God.
And so we never played at that club again in that act.
Oh, no.
But
the way to,
it's really
this
funny.
is so funny. The way to play a jazz gig is play jazz.
Yeah.
Oh, dear, that is funny, yes.
It is, and there's been all sorts of other things too. I don't think people realise, as a musician, I guess with that, you've got to learn to be tactful. And I start giggling sometimes. I'm really bad.
Oh, me
with that.
too.
So, some of those sorts of things, I'll start giggling and I really can't stop. And, I'm quite terrible. And so some of those sorts of, requests or comments, I'll just sometimes shake my head or whatever. I'm not always so good at hiding it, but those times I did. But I think also people don't realise if you're on stage and you're a little bit higher than everyone else, you can see what's going on. And so I've seen some really interesting things, on stage. One night I absolutely lost it because used to have a residency at a pub with a few mates. We had a small band and we used to play there, a couple of times a month on a Friday. And anyway, one night we're up playing and the stage wasn't that much higher than everyone else, but just enough so we could see what was going on. We're playing and anyway, I got the giggles because this guy started unbuttoning this woman's blouse on the dance floor. And I thought, well, this is a bit, he's
interesting.
A bit risky. And then, I was like trying to get the guy who was singing. I was trying to like nod at him, go, look at that. I can't believe this. And, anyway, the next thing his hand disappeared inside a blouse and he obviously reached into a bra and she patted herself out with tea towels because he put them out. And I lost it, to be honest. I couldn't stop laughing.
That's a classic.
And it's just like things like that. I mean, that's pretty funny.
That is classic. That is classic.
Yeah, people are. It's very funny. Oh, very much so.
So, just for the listeners, what instruments do you play? Do you play only guitar, or do you play all different kind of instruments?
Look, most of the time now I play guitar, but I if this means anything, I play quite a few different styles of guitar. Like I'll
So acoustic guitar, electric guitar, bass guitar.
Yeah, I play bass, and I used to play slide a lot as well.
Slide.
Oh, it's great. So I've done a lot of. I've actually been booked to play on a lot of people's albums playing slide.
Cool.
It's one of those things too. Not a lot of people play slide, I find. So it's quite good fun. I play harmonica a little bit. I'm not great, but it's just a different texture. Then I used to play saxophone a lot.
Cool.
But I haven't played saxophone for some time. And it was one of those things where I love it. It was just, I guess I was so busy being a guitarist that the other instruments I was playing dropped off. So, I can play drums a bit, or I haven't played a drum kit for a long time, to be honest. I haven't been behind a drum kit for a while, but used to play drums well enough to at least play in a band. on that, or I used to play cajon, if you're familiar with those, the percussion
No.
instrument. It's actually they're actually from Peru. You sit on it. You've probably seen them.
Probably.
It's like a drum it's like a box that you sit on.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I used to play cajon with a few different acts, which is like being a drummer, but yeah, it's like you're sitting on a box. I've played trumpet a bit as well, a little bit of keyboards. So I think most of the time with that, like some things I was good enough at to play on stage, but a lot of the time I've used those things when I've been doing studio work, and if I've needed to play other instruments, I've played them myself.
Oh, that's really cool.
Because the advantage, having like my own studio, especially at one stage, I had a very good studio set up, and I was doing a lot of studio work. But I'm not a great keyboard player by any stretch of the imagination, but I could make a mistake and start again on that. So I'd get the guitar parts down and whatever, and I depending on what it was, I was reasonable on the drums, not fantastic, but I was good enough for something. Oh yeah, so I'd get the drum parts down or whatever, and then like keyboard parts, depending on what the keyboard parts were, I might have to have several goes, or and there were times, I guess, when I was doing that stuff too, where I might actually notate out the keyboard part, and then I'd get an actual pianist to come and play it if it was too hard for me. I could hear it in my head,
but couldn't do it,
but didn't have the technique. So, but yeah, primarily a guitar player really, and then look, I pushed myself into singing. I don't really see myself as a singer in a lot of ways.
I was just going to ask that. Do you sing?
Well, I do a number of solo gigs, and I just pick songs that work for me vocally. Once again, going back to being shy, I really did want to sing more when I was a kid, and I used to sing early on with our first garage bands and everything, and it was atrocious, I'm sure, but I didn't care at the time for whatever reason. At that point in time, I didn't care, and then when I got really self-conscious about my voice, I don't know if anything in particular triggered that, but I didn't sing for a long time, and I'd feel very embarrassed to do so. And then I guess, look, as a guitarist at one stage, I was good enough to actually get instrumental gigs around the place.
Well, there you go.
So I used to play at a lot of clubs and some pubs around Greater Sydney area for a start, but sometimes further than that too. Almost doing like a Tommy Emmanuel type show. And clubs were happy for me to play just instrumental music at one stage. And then I was working for lots of different people, so I kind of didn't need to sing. And then, times changed, and that became less and less, desirable, and there were fewer opportunities, and, jazz clubs or music clubs weren't as prevalent, I guess. So I started finding it harder and harder to get the work that I once had. So one day I went, I just have to get over this. I'm going to have to sing. And I did a gig, I remember in Goulburn. And actually, once again, Narelle, who I mentioned before, rang me one day and said, "Look, I've got a gig coming up, on a Sunday afternoon at this club in Goulburn. If you're happy to drive down there, they're happy for you to do whatever you want." So she said, "You can just do all your instrumental, acoustic instrumental stuff. That's they'd love it. They're fine with that." And I went, "Oh, thank you." And she said, "Would you like to do that?" I said, "Would they be okay if I sang?" And she went, "You can do whatever you like. They're really not fussed. They just want music." And they've seen you and said, "Yep, we're very happy to give you the job." And they are happy for you to do that. But if you want to sing some stuff, that's great. And at that stage, I really hadn't sung very much, by myself. I'd had to sing in a few bands I was in. There was just no choice, so I'd just pick a part and sing harmonies in the chorus or whatever. I wasn't really singing lead on anything. Anyway, I went and did this gig, and I was a bit nervous, but I just thought, basically stuff it. I'll just let's just have a go, give it a go. And anyway, a lot of people really liked what I did. And I was speaking to Narelle afterwards. She actually rang me when I was driving back to Sydney after the thing. And she said, "What did you do?" And I said, "The only, I said, I only played 2 instrumental pieces and I sang everything else." And she said, "Well, they've given me another 5 dates they want you to come back for," which was great. So, yeah, I do, I do a lot of vocal gigs now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still, I some people really like my voice. Other people probably find it quite boring. I'm okay with that. I guess what I do is put a lot of, especially finger picking stuff around my voice when I'm singing.
Okay, that's clever.
I can add a lot of colour in with that while I'm playing that sort of thing. So, people hear the whole sound, and my voice is quite warm. I do know that,
Yeah.
and a lot of people think it's got a nice tone. I don't think I'm particularly expressive or anything like that as a singer. I just find and once again, I just find songs. I think, I'd be comfortable singing that.
And that, as a vocalist, that's what you have to do, is choose songs that are in your range that you're comfortable with.
Oh yeah. So I've had a few people request, that I do, songs that are more like bordering on screaming, like some of the Jimmy Barnes stuff and things like that.
Right.
And sometimes if I've had those requests at a gig, I've sometimes gone, okay, well, I could do this sort of version with it. And, I find that, to be honest, a lot of people are happy, whether you're great at it or not. If they request a song and you do it, they're kind of happy.
Absolutely.
I'm not always happy with myself with that, but I get away with it.
Yeah.
So I sing quite regularly, and, I often do a gig or two a week by myself.
Yeah, I see that on Facebook. So now, speaking of that, what do you do currently? What is your thing that you do currently? So you do some solo gigs currently.
Yep.
And what else do you do?
I play in the Miss B duo with Bianca Terami. And then we also have a band. And so with Bianca and I, we do a range of things. So we do straight acoustic stuff. We've recently started using a loop station and percussion to set up loop, which has been great fun, actually. It was something I'd kind of not really thought about doing it. And then I was speaking to an agent, and she said, "This stuff's really popular at the moment. A lot of venues want this." And so we were at a pub watching someone else play, and they had this, I wasn't sure what it was at the time. So I took a photo and asked on Facebook, and someone identified it for me. It's called a Roland Hand Sonic, which is a Roland, digital percussion pad that you play with your hands.
Yes, right. Yep.
You can pull up all sorts of drum sounds and everything. So we were talking about and going, "Oh, this guy's got a pretty good sound." And we found one actually really cheaply on Facebook. Someone was selling one. So we bought that, and then I looked into different loop stations, and I bought one, and kind of didn't really want to spend the money, but it's been really good in doing that. So, started doing that. And then also, doing stuff with backing tracks, which I'd started doing stuff with backing tracks years ago because this is going back to my 20s, I guess. I realised that playing in a band is great fun.
Yeah.
But you're then splitting the money
5 ways.
4, 5, 6 ways, depending on the band and the sound guy and everything else.
Yes.
And more there were venues that they wanted that sound, but they didn't want to pay, or they had issues with neighbours and things like that. So you couldn't really have an acoustic drum kit in some of the pubs I used to play in regularly.
Yeah.
Because the police had been, in there, and they'd be getting shut down quickly. So once again, I guess because I'm quite pragmatic, I started thinking about what can I do to make money. And so I started, looking at opportunities for using backing tracks. And so I did that. And I guess with that, and this is very much me, I've always been quite fussy with that. I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I don't want to sound like those awful acts that use just cheap MIDI files.
Right, yes.
Which some people do. So early on, And because I guess I was starting to do studio work in my 20s for different people, and I was quite interested in that. So early on, when I started thinking, oh, well, maybe backing tracks are a way to go, I started recording my own backing tracks, where I'd play, lay the guitars down, and then I might do, the guitars and bass would be fine, and then I'd put the drum tracks together in a few different ways and try to make them sound as good as possible. Because I could play, could play saxophone reasonably well, and I played a bit of trumpet. There were horn parts on it. I actually play the horn parts myself.
Oh, that's cool.
So early on, I used to get accused of miming to a CD with those things because there were real instruments rather than the MIDI sounds.
Right.
People were playing. And so I've always done that because I've just tried to be fairly pragmatic with that. So, yeah, between Bianca and I, we do, straight acoustic things, or we do stuff with, now we're using the loop station and the hand percussion thing, and I'm building loops on the fly as we go, which is great fun.
Mm-hmm.
Or we use tracks. The other thing that I guess we do with that is we have a disco soul funk band.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
Which is great fun. So we're doing that's more of a show. So we're doing things like the Bee Gees and Donna Summer and stuff from the disco era up to probably the early 90s with the sort of the neo soul sort of stuff and some of the dance tracks from then.
Oh, cool.
Now, which is a lot of fun. And so that's really it's really a 5-piece band at its core. I would love to add horns in, but that becomes very difficult to add a whole horn section in and pay everyone for a start.
Oh, yeah.
And then we've had a few gigs recently where with that show, there's just not the space. I think a lot of clubs these days just don't have the space that they used to. I found a lot of venues have gotten rid of stages that they might have had before COVID.
Oh, my goodness, the stage that we performed on the other week. They call that a stage? I just looked at it and went, I am not getting up there.
Was that, without giving away the name of the venue, was that in Parramatta?
It was.
Because I saw that we're actually playing at that same venue in a couple of weeks, I think.
Oh, well, I would just advise you, if you've got a mixing desk, make sure you tie it down, because I nearly lost mine.
We had another venue.
Oh, it's hilarious. Or the square of carpet, and they say, oh, there you go, that's for your band.
I remember once I was booked to play at a wedding. I played for the service and then played for the reception.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at a winery down on the south coast. Anyway, the service was fine. But then when it came to play at the reception, I had to relocate a couple of 100 metres away, still on the same property, but they had a big marquee and everything that they'd set up for the day. And it was all quite lovely. And then there was a chair sitting on the septic tank that was nearby. And they wanted me to sit on the septic tank to play.
Oh, dear.
And I said, do I have to sit here? I go, well, but, we put it there because we thought it'd be a good spot. So anyway, I convinced them that I could move.
Oh, dear.
But, yeah, sometimes people don't really have much of a clue. They either don't care or they don't get it. So, yeah, I know that stage that you're talking about. There's a pub in the Sutherland Shire that has a stage about the same size.
Yep.
And, we had lights that were up on a lighting tree, and that was pretty hard to try and work around with everything.
Oh.
It's really interesting. Dealing with people with that because they've got no idea.
No. No, you just look at it sometimes and go, oh, you've got to be joking. You really have to be joking.
Yeah, and I think that's where, look, I just try to just let things go. Sometimes things do get under my skin, I guess.
Oh, look, it doesn't bother me. I just have a laugh at it and go, I'm here for a few hours.
Yeah, I just generally go with it and go, yeah, sure, that's fine. We'll just do that, whatever you want. Like, and once again, I just try to be pragmatic with those things and go, look, it's not worth getting upset about.
No.
Or I think there's sometimes where things that I've found some things, worth having speaking up about.
Mm.
Like TV screens that you put in front of to play in a club or a pub, and they've got the footy on while you're playing, and the volume's up. And like I remember once playing on the far south coast, and they made us wait for 2 hours before we could start because they wanted to have the footy on instead.
Okay.
And then when we were able to finally start, there was a massive screen above us, and they kept the volume up, and they were playing a replay of a game from the early 80s.
Oh, my goodness.
And they kept the volume up, and we were being asked to turn down because people were trying to watch the game from, like 1982 or whatever it was. And
Must have been a good game is all I can say.
Oh, well, it must have been.
Must have been. Oh, dear.
Yeah, so for the most part, I try to just go, yeah, sure, look, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll just go with it. But sometimes I do get a bit frustrated, and I find sometimes some people can be quite rude, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And some staff can be quite rude and not get it. And so I remember once trying to set up at another club, and football was on, and we were meant to start at 8:30, but the game was finishing at 8:30, so the club director didn't want us setting up, while the game was on, because he was watching it, and we were in his way because we were meant to be playing in front of the TV.
Of course, yeah.
But at the same time, he also said, you better be ready to go at 8:30 when we're expecting you. And I was like, well, we'll be as quick as we can, but I can't guarantee that we're going to be ready at 8:30 if we're not allowed to start setting up till 8:30.
Oh dear.
So yeah, something like that. And he was a bit rude.
Yeah.
About that. So
anyway. Yes. So what's the best live act you've ever seen?
Best live act?
Yeah. Or best show you've ever seen? Like Tommy Emmanuel at the Opera House not long ago. That was one of my favourites.
Yep. Look, I really loved that. That was a great show, and part of it as well, my mate Anthony Snape opened for him.
He absolutely did.
Yeah, and I really like Anthony a lot. So that was really exciting to see him. I know he's played with Tommy before in America and stuff like that as well, but Tommy has been, someone that I've idolised since I was a kid. And I've learnt so much from and everything else. So seeing him, I hadn't seen Tommy play for a few years live. But then, I think it was extra special because Anthony opened, I really like Anthony a lot as a person. And he's a great
He's lovely.
Too.
And he sang, Burn For You. And my goodness, if you closed your eyes, you would have thought it was John Farnham.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I was sitting right in front of Tommy in the first row.
Oh, we were actually just a little bit along from you then.
You were, yeah.
Yeah. So that was great. I think saw Midnight Oil twice last year on their farewell tour.
Okay.
And saw them at Homebush, which was their last official Sydney gig at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it went on for a very long time. And it was fantastic. They were just on fire. And they had a fantastic Aboriginal band called King Stingray opening for them.
Okay.
And they were terrific. So that's one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Wow.
I think as well, don't know, actually. It's love that. I remember seeing Eric Clapton once with an incredible band. He's always got incredible musicians with him.
Mm-hmm.
But even though I love Eric, I don't always like the commercial side of Eric Clapton.
Okay.
I like the Guitar Hero side of Eric Clapton, which doesn't always, doesn't get picked up by commercial radio and everything else necessarily. but I saw Clapton at the entertainment centre before they pulled it down.
Oh, okay.
And his band was phenomenal. And I knew the band he had with him that night, they were there to really, really play. So he did a lot of stuff from Cream, and then they did a lot of early blues.
Oh, what a treat.
And so they were just really on fire. And he really became Eric Clapton, the guitar god.
Yes.
Not the guy that sings Tears in Heaven.
Yes.
Actually, that was funny. When we were leaving, I was there with a guy I used to work with, singer, and as we were leaving, this woman that was sitting next to me started going, "What was all that guitar playing rubbish? I didn't know Eric Clapton played guitar." What was that? I wanted to hear Tears in Heaven and Wonderful Tonight, because he didn't do any of that stuff. He came out and just went, "I'm Eric Clapton, guitar player. Here I am."
Yeah.
And really just went for it. And so all of that stuff was just not on that night.
Yeah. Oh, wow. What a treat. What an absolute treat.
Yeah. So that's another great show. They're probably some of the best. Another night, a player you possibly haven't heard of is a guy called Mike Stern.
No, I don't know.
Mike Stern is a phenomenal jazz guitarist. Once again, he played with Miles Davis for many years. And has won, I don't know how many Grammys for best jazz album of the year, and he's often winning polls, for what they're worth. I don't really go into this stuff much, but he's often been ranked as the best jazz guitarist in the world and things like that.
Wow. And
I remember one night, he was playing at the Basement. And anyway, I'd actually played at a show at the Basement myself a week before, and I hadn't bought a ticket for Mike Stern. Mike Stern is one of my favourite players, but also one of my favourite composers. And so at the end of the night, when I was playing I just played at the Basement, I was packing up. I started talking to the manager, and I said, I've probably left it a bit late, but I'd really love to get a ticket for the Mike Stern show, next week. Is that possible? And he went, we might be able to do something. I said, I'm going to try and put the guilt trip on you. It's actually my birthday on the day. So I know I'm really late, but could I get dinner and a show so I can sit down near the stage? And he said, yeah, look, I'll look after you. That's fine. No worries. I'd played at the Basement a few times around then, and so he knew who I was and whatever, which was quite nice. And anyway, the next week I came and I get let in, and there's a single seat right next to the stage in front of the mic stand, where there's two guitars, and I get led there, and they've given me a seat that's like 3 meters from where Mike Stern will be standing up to play.
Oh, wow.
And Mike Stern had an amazing drummer called Dave Weckl, who was playing with him, jazz drumming legend. And I can't remember actually who was playing the bass that night, but anyway, just a trio. So there's all these people, I don't know if you ever went to the Basement much, but you'd often see pretty well-known musicians in there watching the shows.
Yeah, I've been there once, yeah.
As well. And so I was there and sitting in front of them, and Mike Stern walked out to play. Well, he brought his guitar, he came out to put something else out on the stage before he came out to start the show. And he just popped something out on the stage, and he came over and said, how you going, man? He let down and shook my hand. And good, because he must have thought I was someone really special
to be sitting
with where I was sitting.
Well, you are special.
Well, thank you. But yeah, so I'm sitting there and we do that. And then he went backstage. A few minutes later, they came out and they played a couple of songs. And then he said to me, everything sounding all right? And I went, sounds fantastic to me. And so he talked to me a few times through the show. Then at the end of the night, I got up to leave, and he said, we better chat. Just wait a minute.
Yeah.
And anyway, he had to go and do a few things for, talk to someone else for a press release thing. So Dave Weckl, his drummer, came over and started talking to me. And anyway, I ended up talking to Dave for about half an hour. And I was in heaven going, this guy's amazing and lovely guy. And then Mike Stern came out, and he was talking to me, and I was there going, this guy's got, I don't know how many Grammy Awards, and he's played with Miles Davis and all of these amazing musicians. And Mike Stern's going, well, tell me about your playing. You know, what are you doing? What are you into? All this sort of stuff. And I was just blown away by how, I was truly in the presence of greatness.
Yeah.
Someone that is truly elite as a musician. Now, I'm not often overawed by people. I've worked with people around Sydney in different shows some of them have been in quite big Australian bands and things like that. And I've never been, since I started really going at things and taking myself more serious as a player, I've never been overawed by that. Whether someone's been in the Jimmy Barnes band or someone was in Air Supply or whatever, I'm working with them. That's okay. Like, that doesn't faze me. But this was one time I'm going, this guy I think's got 17 Grammys for jazz recordings, and he played with Miles, like whatever else. And I was going, this guy is one of the most humble people I've ever met. And he was wanting to talk to me about me.
Yeah.
And I was really blown away by that. And we ended up talking for close to 2 hours. And then by that stage, like, the basement wanted to close. And then Dave Weckl said, man, come and get a pizza with us. Come back to our hotel room and hang out.
Oh, how cool is that?
And I really, really wanted to, but I had a meeting the next morning that I really needed to go to as well. So I kind of thought, I so want to go and do this, but I need to get some sleep. I think by this stage it was already 2:00 in the morning or something.
You don't need sleep.
No, well, I actually regret that. Yes. I should have gone with them.
Oh, yeah.
But they were lovely guys. So, like, for me, that was a really special thing. I mean, the music they played was incredible, and that level of musicianship is just
out of this world.
It is. It's like, watching Usain Bolt run or something like that. That's where they're at as musicians. But then to have them be so humble and so inclusive and inviting and everything else. So, I think that's another, going back to some stuff we talked about before, it's another really good lesson for musicians to remember.
Yes.
I've met some of those guys. I've met a few other guys on that level. And at one stage I got to play with a couple of guys on that level in the jazz world, with some workshops they were doing. And I always found them very, very humble and very approachable. And I was thinking, these guys are the ones that could really be, don't you know who I am? And they never were.
They never were, yeah. And isn't that the mark of a great musician?
Oh, look, I think so. It's certainly one of them, and, to compare that, without speaking out of school too much, there's been a lot of singers that I've seen on various music TV shows, without naming them, but you can probably guess what they are.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a number of people that have been on those shows. And look, some of them have been quite good singers, but some of them really haven't been that great. And they've been so arrogant.
Yes.
And, temper tantrums. And they're the ones going, don't you know who I am? And I think, well, you might have been on Channel 9 or Channel 10 for a few minutes because you auditioned, and tried to get people to turn the chairs for you. And that's sort of, that's been the biggest part of your musical journey. You didn't get through there. Just because you're on TV for a couple of minutes doesn't mean that you have the right to think you're whatever you think.
That's right. And, to be humble is one of the greatest things, and to treat everybody as a mate is something you can only aspire to do, really, and to be like.
Yeah, there's another, actually, a gentleman that I used to get lessons of when I was at uni called Carl Orr, who's a wonderful guitarist. And Carl's worked with some great people. Like, Carl's even worked for Sting and things like that in the UK. Carl's a really humble guy, but Carl started working for a drummer called Billy Cobham, who, once again, you might not be familiar with, but is a massive name internationally in jazz drumming. And Carl one night introduced me to Billy when Billy was in Sydney. And Billy was the loveliest guy. And really humble and polite and everything else. And he's another guy that you'd go, well, this is, his drumming is like watching Usain Bolt run or something like that.
Yeah.
but just a gentleman through and through, and really, yeah, so humble, and I really like that actually.
Yeah.
I think that's always a good thing to be. Yeah, because there's always going to be someone that's can do something better than you.
Oh, always. And now,
Yeah.
speaking of that, I've never known anyone who's had a world record before. And you're one such person.
Well, yes.
So
Yeah, that's
I'd like to know a little bit more about the world record for the longest busking session in Tamworth.
okay. Well, I did that earlier this year. I played for 26 hours and 5 minutes straight. For that, and that was really important for me for a couple of charities I did it for.
Yes.
To me, music well, I should say, I think music is a really powerful tool for good, or it can be.
Absolutely.
And so I really value music for many reasons, and one of them is the ability to to do some really good things. So I have played at Ronald McDonald House in Sydney quite a few times for some of the kids.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's fantastic. And I bet they love you too. And did Bianca go with you?
Yeah, she's been quite a few times with me. I've been there by myself once, and I've been with a couple of other people I know. But yeah, mostly go with Bianca. But I really we actually really love doing that for the kids.
Yeah.
And I've been involved overall with 5 world records in total.
5.
Yeah, not all of them have been successful.
That's all right.
But they've all been for different charities.
Yeah. So you also did. I'm sorry. You also did the world's longest guitar marathon. That was 2018.
That's right. Yeah. So that was a bit nuts. So the world's longest busking session was 26 hours and 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I did that to raise money for Ronald McDonald House in Sydney, and
good on you.
Also for Movember.
Yep.
Movember's been, aside from music, Movember's has been very important to me. When I first got involved with Movember, I'd had a mate that had suicided.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And I thought that was, really, that really affected me a lot. That happened when I wasn't much more than a kid.
Yep.
And so I thought a lot about that. And anyway, that's I think men's mental health and guys talking about their issues and everything is really important.
Absolutely, it is.
Unfortunately, I had another mate that suicided about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that was really, really challenging, actually. So I did the busking session to raise money for Movember and for Ronald McDonald House, because I value both of those charities very much. In 2018, I did something that was a little bit more nutso than just playing for 26 hours, which was hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
The world's longest guitar marathon, I played for 125 hours.
Oh my goodness, you did what?
Yeah, I started.
Did you have any skin left on your bone of your fingers?
I'll tell you about that in a sec, if you like. I started at 12:15 on the Sunday
Mm-hmm.
at lunchtime, basically, and I finished at 5:15 on the Friday afternoon.
Oh my goodness!
And yeah, around 72 hours, I think it was in. So I was quite invested in this.
Yeah.
And once again, I was doing this for another charity.
Mm-hmm.
The middle finger on my left hand, so that I use for fretting strings, that split.
Oh, ouch.
On the top, and this is the bit that's a bit squeamish for a lot of people. The finger split, and the string was between my skin and sitting on the bone on my finger.
Ouch.
And I was in a lot of pain.
So you've bled for your art.
Yes, and then not long after that, the ring finger on the same hand split. And
this is only 70 odd hours in.
So I still had another 50 something hours to go.
How did you do it?
I had with those things, obviously, part of you're allowed to earn times for breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not much with those sorts of what are deemed ultra marathons, with those sorts of things. You must be doing the activity for 22 out of the 24 hours in a day.
Right.
So, because obviously you need to be able to go to the toilet. You couldn't hold it for 5 days without dying or anything like that. So, anyway, I used one of my breaks, and I had someone that was on my team, because I had a team of people helping me with the whole thing. He poured super glue over my fingers to try and form a pad.
Oh.
So he got super glue, put it on my fingers, then got a hairdryer from somewhere. I don't even know where he got it from, and dried it really quickly to try and make it as hard as possible so I could keep playing.
And did it work though?
Look, it still hurt like buggery, but I just tried to push that aside. I was doing it for a charity called Musicians Making a Difference.
Oh, wow, good on you.
And they use music, dance and drama to help kids work through their challenges. And I've met some of the kids that charity works with, and it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
With what some of them have been through. And I knew that with something like that, I really had to get to the end to reap the benefits, and the benefits were raising as much money as possible. That's what it was all about. So, I actually, when that happened, I really just tried to focus on the kids that I was doing it for.
Absolutely.
And I tried to put all of my pain and exhaustion and everything else aside, and just try to focus on the fact that I had to get to the end for the most benefit for these kids, which was raising money and for them. And so, we got there with that. There'd been a fair bit of interest, at the start. I mean, a lot of people were thinking I was nuts.
Oh yeah, well, you're not doing a great thing.
Kind of am, but it was also good. Nuts, perhaps in a good way. Yeah. But I had a lot of media exposure with that.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, in the end, that ended up making international news.
Yeah.
So I've got screenshots from, news articles and video, news presentations and everything from around the world, which is really cool to look at now. At the time, I wasn't even aware of some of that, but. I knew that there'd been a lot of interest because the location where I was doing it, people were coming in, or I was getting a lot of phone calls from journalists and from radio stations and TV to talk to me while I was playing with that. So I knew there was a fair bit of interest. So, when my fingers split, that was really challenging.
Yes.
But I really had to, I guess, dig deep within myself and go, okay, I've got to get to the end, because that's what's going to, that's where the rewards really will be.
Yeah.
And I think, it did raise a lot of money and awareness for the charity for these kids, which is fantastic.
Now, do you have any links or anything on any of your pages that you could give me, and we can just add the links in the description of this show? If anybody would like to donate to those children's charities.
I
or
think
to Movember.
Yeah, I've got a Movember page that's up. So there's a couple of things with Movember, but if people just I can give you a link to my personal Movember page. I'm part of a team as well that's raised quite a lot of money, but I've got a personal one, so that's probably the easiest place to go. Or there'll be a link for Ronald McDonald House as well.
That'd be great, I think. We'll grab those off you and I'll just add them in the description of this show.
Yeah.
And while we're at it, now, have you've recorded some songs for yourself, and you'd have that on an MP3, I gather?
Yeah, I've got a few different things that I've recorded. Actually, I've got quite a lot of different things I've recorded.
Well, you know what? Send me one or two of those, and I'm going to add them in somewhere along the line of this interview. Maybe one in the middle and one at the end.
Like?
Pardon?
What sort of stuff would you like?
Whatever you would like to send.
Okay.
What about some finger picking stuff or slide stuff or?
Yeah, I might. Look, I might send you if you're looking at two things. I might send you an electric thing and an acoustic thing.
Perfect.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's. It's been really, really interesting talking to you, Scotty. I never knew you were such a deep person.
Oh, well, thank you. And I know I've talked for way too long.
It's never too long when you've got something to say, you know. And I really appreciate that you've taken your time to sit here and talk with me, that's for sure.
No, thank you. I really appreciate being asked.
Oh, welcome. All right, then. Well, thank you very much. And good luck with your ventures that's coming up with the band and with the Miss B duo and with all the charities and Ronald McDonald House. I'm sure you will continue to do great work.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And we're just going to finish up the show with Scotty playing the blues. Wonderful is that you cannot beat some blues being played. Well, everybody, we've come to the end of the evening. You have been listening to Scotty B and his wonderful stories. I really like the guy. He's really fantastic and he does a lot for children's charities. And please get behind his charities because they are well worth it. Well, you have been listening to Conversations with Crystal. Of course, I'm your hostess, Crystal. Thank you for joining us this evening. And until next week, when we have another wonderful artist, remember to stay safe, stay happy, stay cool, stay awesome, but of course, and always, stay tuned to this channel. Good night.